be honest, I'm too tired to come up with nicknames for everybody. I started thinking of it last night, and I was like, I got nothing. But we have a full 5 people in the studio, which I think we've done maybe once before.
I think I was there for that one as well, actually.
Well, we definitely had like 20 people in the studio once.
We had 20 people in the studio.
That was in the studio, sort of very generously speaking. And
pass
the
around the
microphone,
terrible. Scream so we can pick up on the microphone in the middle of the room.
Yeah, that was not good. But I think this is the first time with proper microphones. Everybody's all in the studio, and I'm here, of course, with this is an episode of like Paper Radio, I should say. My name's Andy. I'm here always with Anthony, Maddox, and also we got Scotty Mertz, Gabor,
hello,
and Zach Barish back for a reunion
hello.
tour.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Yeah! Musical intro.
He always makes us do that every time. Once he does it, you can't help but join in. We were so sleepy because we played in Capital Cube Champs 2025 yesterday, a day-long event in our nation's capital. And it's the morning after, and we got back. Car A got back. What time last night?
Like midnight,
a little after midnight.
Right?
Yeah, we were a little after 1, basically, because we had to wait for the finals to finish because they were using Julian's Cube, and the finals aren't timed, so we just had to wait.
I felt terrible. We're all milling around, and we're like, well, if it was half of us are ready to go, we might as well send one car. The rest of us will be right behind, and then you were not right behind us at all.
We were under the impression that the space would close promptly at 11, and then eventually Lincoln was like, I will stay until they kick us out. I do not care. We will see what happens. And ended up being a late night, but that's all right. It was a good day of Magic. And we're just going to dive in and talk about all of our various experiences drafting the cubes on offer at Capital Cube Champs 2025. I should say we've done a bunch of these tournament report episodes in the past, and I think more and more, Anthony, as we do more of these, we've stopped doing like the full-on, here was game 1, here was game 2, here's my like record win, because that doesn't really, like, no one cares. We're not competitive players. No one cares to hear exactly what games we won and lost. We said we're going to talk mostly about notable moments from all these drafts and our impressions of these different cubes, because there were a lot of cool cubes, I think, in this event. I think you commented, Zach, that it was a particularly diverse range of cubes on offer.
There was a lovely diversity of different kinds of experiences, from desert experiences, rules-modified experiences, very familiar higher-powered style experiences, vibes-based experiences, retro ones. For like a relatively mid-sized event, there was just a lot of different kinds of things that you could try out. And I feel like my biggest regret about the event was a single day event. There's only so many things that you could sample, and it just left me wanting more in a really, really good way.
Do you have to say the thing where you're like, my name is Zachary Barish, I'm Wizards of the Coast, but I'm not the Wizard of the Coast. Don't blame me.
There is no one Wizard of the Coast. You can blame me for whatever you like. But yes, thank you. Wizards, I work for them. And thanks for bringing me on to talk about this game that I love.
Yeah, but what you say does not represent the official positions of Wizards of the Coast. You're here in your capacity as a cool guy.
Thank you. Yes, you're reading that part of my script where I'm like, I have no script today, and I'm on like 8 hours of sleep for the last 2 days.
Combined?
Yeah.
I knew last night was going to be a very few, but I didn't know the night before was
I actually got
more
more sleep last night than I did the night before.
That's not a good sign for the night before.
It's not a good sign for the host. What was wrong?
Anthony, you're just looking for
you can leave notes.
It's all me.
There's a feedback box.
Anthony's a lovely host.
There's a totally anonymous feedback box.
6 out of 5 stars on Yelp.
All right, let's just dive in then. I think first, let's start with Gabor, your first draft of the day, which was Julian's Compost Cube, a local cube to us that Anthony and I have played a number of times.
Yeah, I was really excited about the Compost Cube coming to this event because I've heard a lot about it from folks who have visited Baltimore or cubers from Baltimore. I really like graveyard-focused cubes, and this is like higher power level, more combo-focused than the ones that I've drafted before, so I was really excited. I was looking at all the infinites in the overview that Julian has graciously, shared with the drafters.
I guess one note about this cube, too, is that it is a Graveyard Matters cube, and the other sort of weird design consideration is that Julian avoids artifacts because they're not compostable.
Non-compostable, that's right.
Which is kind of just a cute thing, but I do think that if you look at other synergy cubes, especially graveyard synergy cubes, there's very often like an artifact synergy package running through them as well, just coincidentally. And so I think it is different in the fact that there are very few artifacts, very minimal number of artifacts in the cube.
Yes. So I drafted Safi combo with Rally the Ancestors, which I have those cards in one of my cubes, and I really want to make them work there. And so I was curious about that going into the draft. I opened on fetch, land, or it was Windswept Heath, Overgrown Tomb, Savannah, and then I got Safi 4th pick, and I had seen a Rally go by, and I was sure it would wheel. I knew that nobody was going to pick that. It came around, and it was this classic Abzan creature combo deck where its fair plan is really strong, and then also can go way over the top if the pieces get unanswered, but it is a 4-card combo to win the game with a Blood Artist effect, Safi, a thing to reanimate Safi, and a sack outlet for the reanimate creature. And yeah, I played against John in the first round, who is a New York local. That was a lot of fun. He was on Oath of Druids. Round 2, I played against Brady, who is like a very good player. I think was at Vertex Philly and was undefeated in Swiss at Vertex Philly, if I remember correctly, on like a teamer ramp lands, like go way over the top, cast Emrakul kind of deck, and then lost in the finals to Melissa, who ended up making top 8, playing Gruul land, splash white, and I just got like Valakutted out. But the games were really awesome, really close. I was like one turn off of rallying in one game against Melissa, and I would have won if I had cast that, but she just like killed me with Valakut and Lumra, and that was really sweet. And yeah, I mean, the games are so interesting, so complicated. The draft was really interesting because there's so many like pieces going around from combos. So yeah, I'm trying to think of other cool moments. I think I saw in another match happening that like Oath of Druids, there was one target left in the deck, 30 cards left in the library, and then milled down to like 5 cards left in the library. And John was really trying to figure out like, how can I win with 5 cards left in my library with Sinspara? Sinspara brings back like a Saga Wrath, and then it ticks up, and it was a crazy like sequence. Yeah, it just seemed like a lot of like awesome sequences happening in Compost Cube, and I really enjoyed the games, and I want to draft it again.
That sounds very representative of that cube, and I think is very much in line with Julian's goals. Julian is a player that loves complicated card interactions and big brain board states, and yeah, I am not so good at that cube because I don't have the brain capacity for such things. But that sounds like exactly what Julian would want from that cube, is these sort of close games that come down to these battling, highly synergistic, combo-esque engines.
Yeah, that's exactly what Melissa and I were talking about after we finished up our match, was that we both have these very, very strong fair plans where, you know, we are playing Magic in between, but then we're both always angling towards, can we just go way over the top and end the game on this turn, which is really cool. So it's like, you know, we're playing creatures, we're getting into combat, you know, every life point matters, but there's also always this angle. I think the one highlight moment for me that I remember was I flipped Sephiroth, got the emblem, it got removed, and then I rallied it and had a second Sephiroth emblem, but unfortunately my opponent scooped, understandably, because...
Unfortunately, my opponent conceded before I could do some cool stuff.
Sucks when you don't get to do the cool thing.
No, I did get to do, you know, he was like, oh, that's going to have a second emblem, like, I'm dead. Let's just go to the next game. Yeah, great cube. Really excited to draft it again at some point.
While you were off doing that, Anthony and I were drafting Depleted Lands, which you went also into this event full random minus cubes you already played before, correct?
Correct, yeah. So there's a couple Baltimore cubes, and I think maybe there were 1 or 2 that I just played recently at events, but otherwise just went full random.
I did the same, and for those that don't know, these events are all run with the Hedron Network, which is a piece of software that Gwen Decker built, where you basically get to like rank the cubes you want to play or the cubes you explicitly don't want to play. And yeah, you and I tend to go into these events and basically say, well, I'll play any cube I haven't played before. And that is, in fact, what I did as well. We ended up in Depleted Lands, which is actually, if you had asked me to like look through all the cubes and pick the one I most wanted to play, I probably would have decided on Depleted Lands. This is a like mostly old school, low power level desert cube. And I'm just really into like janky Magic these days where you're like, I've got a 4/4. That's broken. Like,
I had a 4/4 that also did 4 damage to me, and I was like, hell yeah, this card's going to get people.
Yeah. So this was a Desert Cube too, which, again, for those that don't know, and there's always so much information you have to try and provide context for people that are following along. A Desert Cube is a cube where you do not get to take basic lands out of the basic land box at the end of the draft. You draft your entire deck, basic lands and all, and then take 40 cards and play them. This was packs of 18, and that's pretty typical for these Desert Cubes because you need a few more picks to make sure you have enough lands or have enough access to lands to play your deck. And I went into this particular Desert Cube draft with the sort of idea that I want to be playing a lot of colors because I didn't want to be wheeling lands that I couldn't play. And I also figured if it was relatively low power level that I could get away with maybe cobbling together a slightly slower mana base, but at least consistent. Like if I was casting my spells a turn or two later than normal, I thought that'd be okay, as long as I could afford to play the best cards I saw and play any land that I basically saw in the packs. And I really like my deck at the end of the day. I was like a 5-color, mostly blue control deck that had one of each basic, except for 5 islands. So 5 islands, one of each other additional basic. And I had a Pilgrim's Eye, which did a ton of work. And one of the best cards in my deck was Thematic Compass, which is a 2-mana artifact that you can pay 3 and tap to go search a basic land up, put it in your hand. And eventually it flips into a Maze of Ith on the other side, which is kind of gravy for my purposes. I just really like the fact that I could get a basic land every turn. This is the kind of environment where paying 3 to draw a basic land every turn was really, really strong. That was how my draft went. How'd your draft go, Anthony? Did you come in to this with any like idea of what you wanted to be doing, or just kind of a blank slate, ready
No,
to follow the vibes?
I came in totally head empty. And there will, of course, be links in the show notes to all these cubes. So if you want to read like the full overview and see the card list, go check that out.
You hear that, little brag? I came into this draft head empty. I wasn't thinking about anything this day. We'll see. We'll see what
We'll see
how
what
his day
happened.
goes after he comes in head empty.
I mean, I just went in with a blank slate. The main thing that I was thinking about was eating my vegetables and trying to sort of pace myself such that I was taking lands and spells in the right proportions so that I would end up in the right place. The key benchmarks are like at the end of pack 1, do I expect to have about 5 lands? At the end of pack 2, do I have about 10? And making sure that I also feel like I have enough playables. I am not as bold as you. I totally get your strategy of just playing a bunch of colors because it just gives you access to more potential land picks and being able to take advantage of that. But I started with, I think my first picks were largely lands, and also Secure the Waste was maybe my second or third pick.
Seems strong.
You know, looking at the cards that were in the pack, so I was like, this seems like a bit of a power outlier. Obviously, a very flavorful power outlier, so I see why it's there. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I was really taking things like Pilgrim's Eye really highly. Anything that was a 2-for-1, I was like, this is great. And Secure the Waste is a pretty easy 3 or a 4-for-1 because if you put a bunch of mana into it, you just get a ton of bodies.
Yeah. And then I think maybe mid pack 1, I got a Saltari Gorillas, which is it's one of these old school cards that I always really enjoy playing with. It's a creature with shadow that when it deals damage to your opponent, you can redirect that to creatures. So it's just like, at its ceiling, it just feels nuts when you're just like, yeah, every turn I'm just killing one of your creatures, and then eventually it'll be a threat that you just can't stop and will get you dead. So getting that late, I started feeling like, okay, red-white is really the place to be, so I'm happy that I can play that Secure the Waste that I took, and then really got paid off for like, you know, this is a Desert Cube, so I took a Caves of Koilos early thinking maybe this is just going to be a Plains, like I just need any kind of fixing, some of it's going to be a little bit janky, and then at some point I got a Lingering Souls and was like, okay, we're doing it. This deck feels pretty solid, and yeah, so I ended up Boros splashing that Lingering Souls and one other black removal spell, and overall, this deck felt pretty powerful, pretty fun, and much more consistent than a lot of Desert Cube drafts might, where it's like I was curving out very consistently.
I thought my deck was quite good. I ended up 2-1, and the matches I won were pretty decisive. They were like, I took as many removal spells as I could, as many 2-for-1s as I could, and then fixing and just other power outliers. But most of the cards in my deck were going to remove one of your things, generate some marginal 2-for-1 for me in a la Pilgrim's Eye or whatever, or just, you know, slowly grind you out. That strategy worked really well in most of my games. This is a very low power environment, but my opponents were playing cards that were just bad. And I was like, that card's just not good. Like, I don't have to care about it at all. I don't need to bother removing it. You can, like, attack me with your 2-mana 1/1 flyer in black. Like, that's fine. I'm not worried about that even a little bit. I did lose to you in round 2, Anthony. And I got to say, I really love this cube. This is maybe, well, second favorite cube.
What was your favorite thing that happened in our match?
Well, I
know mine.
I do think Lingering Souls is just, it's a bridge too far here, in my personal opinion. You know, the kind of cube where, yeah, people are playing 2-mana 1/1 flyers, and I'm like, Pilgrim's Eye and Thematic Compass are two of my best cards. And you're just like, Lingering Souls, flashback Lingering Souls. And I'm like, ugh.
Hey, I cast it twice in the third match as well. 4 times.
I did beat it once, and the time I beat it, I had a counterspell in hand. And of course, one of the great things about Lingering Souls is that it's really good against counter magic, because you're like, okay, great. If I counter it, you just are going to flash it back, and you still get a lot of value out of your card. And so I had a counterspell both times you cast Lingering Souls. The first time I thought I could beat it, and I did actually, which was cool. And the second time I was like, well, I don't think I can beat it, but I also don't think countering it is going to help. So I didn't even bother there either. My deck's actual win condition in most of my games was Bosch Iron Golem, which was so fun. That's 8 mana for a 6/7 with Trample, an artifact creature, and you can pay 3 in a red to throw any artifact, including Bosch, at any target and deal damage equal to its mana value. So Bosch can throw himself at your opponent for 8. He's also a 6/7 Trampler. And this is just kind of, like, my deck was just like, I will grind you out, I will trade off in combat with my little Pilgrim's Eyes, and then I will play this huge threat that, in many games, I waited to play it on 10 mana with the card counterspell held up behind it, because I was like, this is how I win the game, and there's no clock, so I can just wait, and then I'll play this when I can protect it. And that was a really cool card. I loved winning with Bosch. That was pretty sick. But yeah, Lingering Souls was rough.
I also really enjoyed Tarngarth. This is one of my favorite things about this cube, was that a lot of the old border cards still felt really relevant. Oftentimes they'll be like, oh, here's this mixture, and it's like, cool, it's awesome to see these old border cards, but then the new border cards kind of take over. That really didn't feel the case here, and I think partly because of the inclusion of some of these specific cards that I'd just never seen this before, but 5 mana 4/4 Vigilance lets you fight creatures every turn was very cool. I had a bunch of creatures with First Strike as well, which got to line up some cool, like, you're attacking with your 7/7, and I'm going to block with multiple First Strikers, and then use a burn spell to be able to take a giant creature out. So, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun with this deck. I also had Wasteland, which was great against your tapped fetch land.
Yeah, I have my Grasslands Wastelanded, which, I mean, just the power disparity between those two cards, I really felt. Grasslands is, for those that don't know, it's a fetch land that can get plains or forest, just like a Windswept Heath. The difference is that the Grasslands itself comes into play tapped. So I led on Grasslands, and you were on the play and played a regular land, and your second land play was just, I'll wasteland your Grasslands before you can fetch a basic I can't wastelands with it. And I was like, great, cool. It's like, what's a good metaphor? It's like you did a burnout around my, like, tricycle in your, like, sports car, blowing exhaust in my face. It was pretty messed up.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about desert cubes is some of them do have some land destruction, and because people's mana bases are janky, you can sometimes just win a game based on that. I think I actually kind of overdid that in my match 3, so I beat you in round 2, moved on to round 3, played against Alex from our local play group, and he was the designer of the oldest school, which, are we going to talk about that today?
We are not.
I don't
None
think
of us
so.
drafted the oldest school, so...
But yeah, he was playing this like big red-green creatures deck, and just he had too much big stuff that even though I was trying to get in quickly and be aggressive, I could not. He could just turn the corner and crush me, and I also used my wasteland too aggressively, I think, when it just didn't matter. He's like, I just have tons of lands, I'm going to play Sylvan Library and then draw as many lands as I need, and lost in the finals there.
Yeah, there's a lot of land destruction in this cube, more than most desert cubes that I've played. And I think they break singleton on the slow fetches. So then like the land destruction is even more brutal. Scott and I drafted this as our round 3. Do you want to go first, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I kind of leaned into that since I was like, all right, this is an old school kind of desert environment. I'm going to prioritize disrupting your game being developed. So I was really trying to cut you off on your resources. I managed to snag a wasteland, and I was just picking up stone rains, pillages as much as I could. And then as I was going through the draft, blue started to be open. So I was kind of trying to build this, like, cut off your resources and then use tempo advantages to, like, memory lapse you and kind of eke out with my little flyers and just have this little Jeskai build. It was kind of similar to Anthony's, where it was red-white, but then blue actually ended up being the most open and kind of flowed my way. So I also had like Soltari Gorillas, Wasteland, etc. And then, Gabor, you want to talk about yours?
Well, real quick, I think the thing that I want to make sure people hear, if they have never played a Desert Cube, is that the land destruction is extra relevant here, not just for like tempo reasons, but because you might have 3 black sources in your whole deck.
Yeah,
and so it's
exactly.
like it's way easier in this environment to just like cut you off of spells by, pillaging your swamp, which in a regular cube, you would think that might not come up very often, and it probably wouldn't. But here, the mana bases were all much more constrained. Everyone's mana base was just worse. That was part of the sort of table stakes and the sort of expectations of the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I had at least 2 or 3 lands that were effectively just wastes. It's like, I just need another land. Okay, here's this island in my whatever red-white deck that I just need any kind of mana.
One of the cards I was most excited to wheel was Annex, which is a blue aura for 2 blue that just steals an opponent's land. You just control that land. And that is, first of all, I took it because it's 2 for 1. And second of all, I also you only have 1 green source over there. I'll just take that from you. And they're like, yeah, well, I don't.
Never casting this Greater Sandworm.
I have 1 other green source I can maybe draw into, but I don't have any way to actually go get it. So yeah, that's why the land destruction can theoretically work here.
Yeah, I did have Annex in my deck. I had Copy Land. I also had Bribery as my like singular win condition. It's like, I will disrupt your resources and then I will win with your resources.
Was Bribery good?
It was really good at helping my opponents get their thing into the graveyard to be reanimated. It was a really great entomb for you multiple times. One thing that I was really tickled by that I took pretty highly early on was Fulminator Mage and Detritivore, which Gabor and I had talked about like at length, which I was just like so charmed by, and this card has just like sparked so much joy and intrigue, which I think for me was like my through line through the whole event. Just as a quick sidebar, is like I've seen so many freaky cards that I've not normally seen in other environments, and that sort of diversity that we were talking about earlier just like really is why I love these like grassroots events. Is just there's so many different things that you will not see in like your sort of Power Max environment. Being able to suspend like the worst Lurgoyf you've ever seen is so exciting.
What's he even doing here with his pinky? It's
You don't
You have to ask.
the redacted nail.
Friend of the show, Greg, beat me in a game in round 1 just by playing Derelict, which is just a 7-mana black Colossal Dreadmaw. And you can also sacrifice 3 black creatures instead of paying its mana cost. But it's just like, that card is so much cooler than any other 6-mana, 6/6 with trample. It's 7 mana, actually. But it's just so much, the art is so cool, the flavor is so cool. And he just played that, and I was like, I'll keep drawing cards. Maybe I'll draw my 1 copy of Boomerang and then figure something out. But it was really, really good.
One other thing about the draft that I isn't true for all Desert Cubes, but was true for this one, is that like basics were premium. Like basics are really good lands here. There are a lot of lands that are just a basic that is not typed, that enters tapped and has no other text, or
yeah, like Magosi the Water Veil, which I was
Exactly.
playing. I was like, this is a really cool bad island.
Exactly. That was also in my deck. So yeah, I went into the draft knowing that. I think also our draft, is the free play. It was like more loose. I think a number of people in the pod were like, which of you sickos ranked a Desert Cube as your third draft of the day? Like, what's wrong with you? And I had spoken to Andy about his deck, and so I maybe went in with a bit of a preference towards 5-color, or like being open at least to 5-color when I am not typically in Desert Cubes that are more modern and higher power level. But with how low power level this cube was, I think it was a good choice. I opened on Island Mountain, Lingering Souls, Sylvan Library, and so in my first four picks, I had
Gabor.
5 colors, and it was a blast. I took like every land that I saw that I wouldn't be embarrassed to put in my deck very highly. So Pain Lands, basics. I got a Terramorphic Expanse, and I had one of every basic, so that was huge. I did not get as many islands as I would have liked because I was similarly like a base blue splashing the other 5 colors, but I was seated between 2 other blue drafters, so that didn't go great. Yeah, I was like a 5-color control deck. My win conditions were Animate Dead on literally anything. And then a 6-mana 5/4 flyer that can only block flyers. It's a Djinn of, I can't remember the exact name. And then a dragon, 4 white, 5/5 flyer. It cannot attack unless you sack a land.
Exalted Dragon.
Exalted Dragon, which
love
I was
the
like,
art on Exalted Dragon.
love the art. And I mean, it's just like a 5/5 blocker, which is insane until I want to win the game, which, that was exactly on plan for me. I lost to Pestilence round 1. We only had time for 2 rounds. I had in each game Pestilence cast against me, Pestilence cast against me, and then I played Scott and I had Bribery cast against me both games. So I got to play against some of the most miserable cards in all of Magic. If I had known that Pestilence was in the cube, I definitely would have taken the Disenchant I saw. I probably should have taken it knowing it was like an old border. That's just like the vibes of old border typically. I think really the highlight, like the gameplay was a lot of fun and it was a little delirious because the games are so grindy and the power level is so low. But the highlight was really the draft. You just like open a crazy card and just like giggle. Like Scott and I were also sitting next to each other, so we were just like showing each other like, you passed this to me, like how could you do that? Or like, you passed this to me. This is the worst card I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, there's like a 2-mana 1/1. I might be getting the stats wrong, but it was like a 2-mana 1/1 red, like nomad that has protection from deserts and no other text. I was like, what?
Oh, I almost put that in my deck.
I mean, it was, Singleton is broken for desert. So it's like, and there's like the sack a desert cycle from Amonkhet, I think.
Yeah.
So like I get it, but
Dunes,
it was,
etc.
Exactly. Yeah, it was hilarious. Just Life Chisel. Anthony and I were talking about this morning, and Scott and I were giggling like the whole draft over Life Chisel. It came around a lot, as you could expect. It's like a 4-mana artifact. In your upkeep, you can sack a creature and gain life equal to its toughness, and the art is like really haunting. Cannibalize has very haunting art as well. Yeah, it was the vibes were hilarious. It was a great time in free play. Yeah,
I'm glad you brought up Desert because Desert is a hell of a card. I feel like it goes under the radar, but there were so many games. That was one of the like wastes I had in my deck. But there were so many games where my opponent played in round 1 against Bree, turn 1 Savannah Lions. I'm just like, okay, here's a desert. Do you want your lion to go in the desert or not? It's up to you.
Yeah, and I had Lingering Souls, which of course was really strong, but loses definitely to Pestilence. So
yes, it sure does.
And that was like a green-black deck, and so it was the designer of Tresserhorn Gardens. He was really nice, but he was like resolving a 7-mana 7/7 that my only removal for was like a tap this creature and keep it tapped, and then Pestilence, and then just like killing me with Pestilence because I'm like 1 life point lower than he is. And he was super nice, and at the end he was like, wow, yeah, that card does suck to lose to, doesn't it? I was like, yeah, it does. But it was hilarious. So I had a good time.
One last thing on this cube. Your mention of Disenchant reminded me that of all the other things my deck was doing, I also had Mystical Teachings, which was one of my favorite cards in my deck. So I had that package, and I had a couple of Disenchants I could bring in brought in certain matchups, and having a tutor for them was really sick. It was awesome to play a Bosch Iron Golem, Mystical Teachings, thematic Compass deck, and just have a great time with it.
Those are such wonderful cards to combine with each other, and such unusual cards as well.
Yeah, I also had thematic Compass, and it was great. Maze of Ith is broken, yeah.
Turns out, I do have one gripe and an apology. Gripe is that why is there a card with banding in this cube? And apology, I'm so sorry to the judges for asking so many questions about how does banding work, and how does banding work with flying, and how does banding work with first strike, and how does banding work on blockers versus defense, and everything else. I'm sorry.
Zach and I were talking about banding when we were walking to our place in Philly for the Philly Cube event earlier this year. And I was like, how does banding work? We were also with another friend, and we had no idea how banding worked. And Zach was like, the only thing you need to know about banding is you can never attack into a creature that has banding ever.
Yes. Banding has two very different mechanics on offense, on defense, and on defense it is very, 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 very good.
I had no idea.
I still don't get it, to be honest.
We'll talk about it afterwards. Shall we go back in time to Scott and my round one?
Yes, let's do it.
So our round one, we drafted Lincoln's Penrose Cube. Lincoln, the wonderful organizer of Capital Cube Champs. I described the Penrose Cube, and correct me if you have a better description. I wouldn't be surprised. It is a synergistic cube. You're trying to identify lanes of synergies, pockets of ways you can make your cards combine to be more than the sum of their parts. It's about a moderately powerful cube. I feel like often decks are going to be comparable to what you're going to see from Booster Draft or Booster Draft of a Master set. Very regular in that regard. I'm staring at Anthony, and Anthony's not looking at me.
Wink.
And
He likes to look at his computer when we record.
I'm looking at the cube.
No, I know.
And it's also an asymmetric color distribution cube. I believe it's somewhat similar to the expansion Torment, where black is overrepresented, and I believe white and green are underrepresented as colors. So more people are going to be contesting black with each other, and white and green are going to be potentially easier lanes to get into because there are few people to fight with, but it will be much harder if you're fighting with people in those lanes.
Yeah, that definitely sounds accurate.
I had an absolute blast. Every single one of my matches was awesome, had great back and forth. I won a game where I stabilized at 1 life. I ended up fighting with a neighbor of mine. I took a pack 1 pick 1 Dragon's Rage Channeler out of a somewhat low-powered pack. I got past Psychomancer from the Necron decks of Warhammer 40k, and then followed by Treyarch Praetorian from the same decks.
Yikes.
And I'm familiar with those cards because I have a cube that is in a very similar lane to Penrose Cube, also a synergy cube, also has artifact and graveyard synergies, and also really benefited from the Necron deck, helping tie a lot of the room together for black. Oh, and I got a pick for Angie Falconwrath, which was like, oh, am I going to be artifacts or am I going to be madness? I did not know for the entire draft which was going to be the case, and 2 seats to my right was another drafter in black and red who was trying to make the exact same determination. And as a consequence, my deck had a bunch of pockets of synergies, but I was not really an artifacts deck, and I was definitely not a madness deck. But I just had good disruption, good cards, and then a couple ways to supercharge my deck. Of like, Psychomancer makes it so that it's suddenly a lot harder to attrition me out. Goblin Engineer is an incredibly fun card to loop. Or sometimes I would just have Mayhem Devil on the battlefield, or Scrabbling Claws, and my opponent's deck would struggle to function. I think every single person was local for that event. Round 1, I played against, I think, Garrett on Blue-Red Spells Discard, where just they consistently drew their entire deck every single game. Round 2, I played against the person who was passing me Black-Red. They were a bit more aggressive. I was able to go a little bit slower and over the top. And then round 3, I played an insane long game of Malcolm on White-Black Sacrifice, where we went to turns. Malcolm, very graciously scooped what I had lethal the next turn. But just all of those games were tense and grindy and really big brain thinky, but also enough of the cards were relatively straightforward and streamlined. Even those cards that I described, they're very, very powerful. They have a lot of modality, but they don't have a ton of different text. There's a lot of different applications to the text, which I love from a synergy cube. I feel like the biggest piece of advice I would have for somebody like playing an environment like this is in synergy cubes, disruption, particularly really flexible disruption, something that can hit multiple permanent types or something that can incidentally interact with the graveyard at a low cost to your deck, or just good removal are going to overperform because being able to disrupt people's synergies will make it so they can't make cards more than some of their parts. And yeah, I had a great time. I would love to talk to Lincoln more about this, and I would love to draft this cube again.
Yeah, I definitely felt the same. I have been kind of transfixed by this cube for a while, even though I've not had the opportunity to play it at previous events. I think for me, this was a top priority to play coming out of this weekend, just because I've been wanting to tinker in a sort of Torment-inspired environment myself. So this was both a study in that concept that I know is beloved by a lot of people who I trust, who are better at Magic than me, who are really great designers, and Lincoln himself is one as well. So it was really cool to do this. I fell, I think, almost I got lost in the sauce, if you will. There's been a lot of conversation.
You love to get saucy.
I do.
You saucy little boy.
See, when I ain't had no money, I still had sauce. Mm-hmm. See, if you don't got no sauce, then you're lost. But you can also get lost in the sauce.
That's right. My pack one pick one was Hogak. I was like, all right, I'm going to do the thing, you know? Like, we ball. Like, let's do it.
I think that's the thing to do in this cube. That's like the boogeyman to some degree that Lincoln is very aware of and comfortable with.
It wasn't. Not for me.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. So yeah, I took Hogak, like windmill slammed it. I was like, this is where I want to be. And I was actually starting off mostly black blue. There were a lot of good things that popped up early, like Kishla Skimmer was there, Mental Note, Bitter Triumph, all in my like early picks. But Kishla Skimmer obviously put me into green a little bit. So as my draft developed, I just really was being fed all the Golgari, all the Sultai cards. I had Grimflayer. I had God, this card is truly just like the worst name ever. Urborg Lurgoyf.
I loved Urborg Lurgoyf.
Yeah.
It's the Urborg Lurger.
See, and I truly, much like these games, I fumbled through that every time I had to pronounce it. But yeah, I had Aftermath Analyst, Unearth. I picked up Satoru early on because I was like, maybe I can be like that Unearth sort of like deck that had a like Flash in the Pan in Modern, try to like cheat card advantage with that, Kishla Skimmer, and just like really just generate crazy card advantage while ultimately like funneling delve synergies. I saw Cemetery Tampering, which was like a card that felt like a bad Ripples of Undeath that could cheat out my Hogak if it got under there. But I think my deck was really ultimately missing like the key payoffs besides Hogak. I had Hooting Mandrills as well, and then Spectre of Mortality, which was actually the best card in my deck. If y'all have not seen this, it's from Wilds of Eldraine. It's a flying 3/3 for 5 that lets you exile any number of creatures in your graveyard, and then it gives all other creatures -X/-X. So this, to me, was basically like Plague Wind effectively, or like my reset opportunity when I inevitably fell behind trying to like funnel into my graveyard.
Yeah, I think like something I've talked about with Lincoln and that we were talking about, Scott, is that like the pack one pick one Hogak is a weaker deck than a graveyard deck that just happens to open Hogak in pack 2 or pack 3 or something like that. Because if you're like trying to build a Hogak combo deck, then it's a singleton cube. You're just not going to see the Hogak. You know, the rest of your deck might not be as well constructed as you might wish. So I think that was like something that I also observed in my draft of it.
And that definitely came to play out, right? I also played Malcolm round 1, and we had, I'd say, maybe my best match of the weekend. It was super grindy. We like went to game 3. It was just really back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Stone Cloaker was just like both miserable for me, but great for the matchup in the sense that it was just like, what if Cling to Dust could also be a pixie type card where I'll buy back my best ETB, and it just had me on watch where I, what's the Delirium land?
Shifting Woodland?
Shifting Woodland was also in my deck. So I was like, I had threat of Shifting Woodland constantly to become Hooting Mandrills or Kishla Skimmer. And I ultimately milled out multiple times during this draft, which was really hilarious to have that play out. Overall, I love this cube. It was really great. Match 2 was also against Ian Braverman, actually. Ian was on...
Okay, wait, let me guess what he was drafting. Was it Blue-White Blink?
No.
Oh.
No. Blue-Black.
Blue-Black Blink.
Blue-Black Madness.
Okay, good job, Ian. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Shout out, Ian. You kicked my teeth in so quickly that I got to get, like, air multiple times. It was great. Really great match. We had a good time, just having fun, chatting, really fast play. And then match 3 was against Garrett as well. That Is It deck was sick. They were just like making Riel gain all the card advantage. We really had a good 3 games. It was a great time.
And then, Gabor, you played Penrose Cube in round 2, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So I was in a 6-man draft of Penrose, and I've drafted this twice before at other events in Philly and then at CubeCon last year. I love this cube. It inspired one of my cubes for like color imbalance, and it's also a bar cube, which we maybe somehow haven't even mentioned yet. I think it just plays so well, it doesn't even necessarily come up. That was something somebody commented at the end of the draft. They're like, oh, it's a bar cube? I didn't even realize.
Oh, and to define that term, because yeah, you're right. I didn't even realize that. I think a bar cube tends not to use tokens and not to use any counters.
Yeah, and no double face cards as well. I think there's some it depends on the designer how loosey-goosey they want to be with it. So I had drafted it twice before. I had previously done like blue-black self-mill and Rakdos artifact aggro, and then this time I opened on Psychomancer, and then another black... Blade of the Oni was my second pick. And then I was like a black deck sort of splashing white and blue. It was really strange. I got like a bunch of Orzhov lands, a bunch of Azorius lands, but no Dimir lands. So I sort of couldn't like do the full 3 colors the way I wanted to. I did see Lampad of Death's Vigil, which after talking to Lincoln later, I learned is like a relatively new addition. A friend of mine who I talk about like Magic with a lot told me a big level up moment for him was watching like somebody stream, I think it was Theros Beyond Death, where that was printed like limited, and they were like talking to another streamer like, oh, like what do you pick here? And there's like a pretty good uncommon in 2 colors or something, and then Lampad is in the pack, and the streamer's like, no, I'm definitely taking Lampad. This is like the best common in this set. It's so broken. So I knew that story, and so I saw this like middle of pack 2. I was like, well, yeah, this seems like exactly what I want to do. I have Blood Artist, I have Psychomancer, and then I did Lampad, and my quote-unquote Exodia was Lampad, Satoru, and Reassembling Skeleton. So for 3 mana, I can draw a card and drain them for 1 every turn, or for every 3 mana, I can do that as many times as I want. I got run over in the first round by a great aggro deck, and then my other 2 rounds, I did exactly what I wanted to do. I was so grindy. I also had Tashar, and I could just, Satoru plus Tashar is insane. I could, ninjutsu something, like an artifact creature back to hand, which triggers Satoru, and then I cast the, artifact, bring something back from my yard, trigger Satoru again. It was just like, it was really like firing on all cylinders. My opponents were really great. And then John, who's a New York local and was also in this pod, and he took down the 3-0 with a great Izzet Spellslinger deck doing Riel stuff. So I heard I didn't play against him. I love Penrose Cube. It's just every time I get an opportunity to draft it, I really want to. I think also seeing how the cube has changed a little bit over time is really fun and interesting because I'm not in the play group, so I don't like see it iterate over every change, but then get to see like how the changes stack up over like a few months at a time.
Cube designers take notes of all of the like complexity and nuance and synergy that is possible without any tokens or any counters. Just a huge accomplishment. And also I feel like a lot of people think that, oh, if I want to play like synergistic Magic, this is like a necessity. I have to play with these sort of potentially game board complicating mechanics, and you just don't. Like there's lots of cards that allow for these kinds of crazy loops or like engines that do not require any of that stuff.
I totally agree. And just like so well designed, definitely worth taking a look, even if you're not working on this kind of cube or these exact like goals, just looking at the card list, seeing how things interact, just look at a few sample packs. It's really like gonna like be very obvious to you. My like best story from that draft was stabilizing after missing my 3rd land drop on a Multi 6 in like my 3rd round. Missed it for maybe 2 turns and then like hit my 3rd and 4th land drop and then just won the game on 4 lands because I was generating so much value with my recurring engine and just chump blocking forever with Reassembling Skeleton. Maybe not the most fun to lose to, similar to Pestilence, where I'll chump block you forever and, kill you 1 at a time. I'm looking at my like life total notes where it's just goes
ding, 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 ding,
like,
ding, 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 ding.
17, 18, 17, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 25. And then my opponent's like slowly going from 20 to 0, 1 life point at a time. But I had a lot of fun.
For our second draft of the day, Anthony, Scott, and I were all placed into Tresserhorn Gardens. Now, I know, Anthony, you were both for random. Scott, were you ranking cubes at all? Did you choose to play Tresserhorn Gardens?
I was ranking this weekend. I did rank Tresserhorn Gardens. I did not look at the list fully or thoroughly in advance, which definitely, if you're ranking cubes, do that.
No, you don't have to do that. Just
don't rank cubes.
Just go random.
You said, okay, the overview says, ooh, spooky.
No,
You're
yeah.
like, great.
I was like, Grixis, cool. I like these 3 colors. It was that and the Kuleshov, right? Was that the other cube? Yeah. Those were the 2 that I'd ranked for that environment. I was just like, I either want to think about red a lot or not at all.
Well, it sounds like one of your big interests going into this weekend, starting with Penrose, was cubes that are playing around with how color is used.
Yes, definitely.
I can't imagine why that'd be a focus of yours right now.
Good question.
I wish we had time to talk about Colosseo?
Colosseo, yeah.
Colosseo. Damn.
It's okay.
You'll get it right one day.
I do want to talk about that cube at some point. We don't have time this episode, but a new cube of Scott's that I am kind of obsessed with. It was actually my favorite drafts of the weekend were that cube, even though they weren't part of this event.
So Tresserhorn Gardens is, I think you sort of mentioned, a Grixis cube, so it has no green or white cards, so perfect environment for me to have a great time in.
How'd that go for you?
It is a very high-powered environment with a lot of like splashy, iconic cards you expect to see in like a vintage cube, but also some stuff that's very much in just sort of like Warren's taste. And there's a couple cards where it's like, okay, nobody's ever going to play that, but it's cool to see. I wish I could come up with a good example. What are some of the
Sword of Hearth and Home?
Sword of Hearth and Home, yeah, protection from cards not in this cube.
Yeah, there were a couple of cute inclusions like that for sure. And I remarked during the draft, I also didn't look at the list at all before we started drafting. I was like, I'll just figure this out as I go, which I like to do. I think it's fun to experience a cube that way. I remarked during the draft early on that like I love playing Grixis, but what I love doing with Grixis decks is picking apart my opponent's green-white decks. That's my favorite thing to do with Grixis. And so, when I'm in an environment where I can't do that, it definitely changes the context a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge topic, but I think that that's something that is worth pointing out often about cube design is people like to be like, oh, I love doing blank. I'm going to make a cube all about blank. But do you like playing the mirror match every single match, or do you like it when that deck exists in a broader context?
Which is not to say all the decks in this cube are all samey.
No,
but,
of course not.
There's a lot of range, I think.
We've had a lot of fun playing color restricted and color imbalanced cubes lately.
Yeah. I would describe this as one of the sort of maximalist Power Max cubes. It was packs of 17 cards with no other sort of weird restrictions or anything. So you just get to see more cards. Everyone's deck is more powerful. It's also a cursed number for trying to lay out your deck picture for the Hedron network.
Oh, no, you solved that problem, and all the judges agreed that you did a great job.
I thought it was 9 rows of 9 and 8. It looked great. My pictures are way better than everyone else's pictures.
It's true.
No question. Yeah, and I opened on a pack that had a bunch of powerful cards, and I was like, oh, this cube is very powerful. And included among the cards in my pack were both Tinker and Tolarian Academy. And I was like, both of them in the same pack? What? I'm going to put the person I'm passing to on the other one, almost certainly. I still decided to take the Tolarian Academy and go that direction. I didn't actually know the Tinker targets, so I was like, without knowing them, I haven't looked at the cube list. I don't know if this is like a Tinker, I win the game, or if it's like a Tinker for value or something. But I felt like there was a pretty good chance that just from looking at the cards in the pack that I'd be able to make a pretty good Tolarian Academy deck. And then, just saw sort of a murderer's row of the most powerful cards in Grixis's color identity. I'd actually be curious to know from the designer if there are cards that are excluded because they are considered too good. I mean, there wasn't like Moxen, but there was Time Walk. I assume there was Ancestral Recall floating around.
Recall and Time Twister, yeah.
Every powerful card you can imagine. Name a card is probably in there, right? Your Hull Breacher's in there. Opposition Agent, I'm pretty sure, is in there. Like all the cards that are just kind of the Grixis Power Max cards.
Lord of Tresserhorn, classic Grixis staple.
Iconic power outlier right there.
That was my favorite part of the draft, honestly, was seeing the Lords of Tresserhorns and the Swords of Hearth and Home. Because, I mean, frankly, I've just played a lot of powerful cubes in my day, and I think people listening to this podcast know that this is not like my favorite Magic to play, at least not this chapter of my history with the game. And I ended up in an Artifact Matters deck with Upheaval and a bunch of Planeswalkers and a fair number of board wipes. So I was, I guess, a control sort of ramp list. I was wheeling half the cards for my Artifact deck and not the other half in a way that was very confusing to me. Like, in Pack 2, I saw in consecutive packs, Basalt Monolith into Forensic Gadgeteer, which has a bunch of text that says artifacts matter and also goes infinite with Basalt Monolith, just makes infinite colorless mana. And I was like, okay, I took the Forensic Gadgeteer, and I was like, if the Basalt Monolith comes back around, I'm in a good place. And the Basalt Monolith, no, I'm sorry, no, I didn't. I did not take either. And I was like, no, wait.
You were like, this is going to be fine. I'm going to wheel both of these cards and then take them both on the wheel.
I mean, yes, actually. I mean, the packs are really good, and those are both specific cards.
There are 17 card packs, but it's not like you have a Cogwork librarian.
The packs were full of other very powerful, much more generically good cards. And I was wheeling a lot of cards for the Artifact deck. I don't think it's insane to think you're going to wheel Basalt Monolith and Forensic Gadgeteer out of these packs. I wheeled just the Forensic Gadgeteer, and I was like, somebody took Basalt Monolith and then did not take the card in the very next pack that said goes infinite with Basalt Monolith and wants to be in the deck that plays a bunch of artifacts. And I got to the end, and I met this really nice guy, Ryland, who's a fan of the show, who was just like, oh yeah, I'm the other artifact deck. I didn't read that one. He was just straight up like, I didn't read that one. I didn't read that one. And I was like, what about this card? You didn't take it? He was like, I didn't read that one either. He was just like,
normal.
He was
Thank you for the honesty, because there are so many. I did read Lord of Tresserhorn. That one seemed worth reading. But
well, Lincoln did offer $10 for whoever played it, so you had value right there. There was EV on the table,
which to me was like a perfect little like time capsule of like, it genuinely kind of messed up my draft. I thought my deck was open and there was like just kind of weird signals happening. My deck was not open, but the other player was just not reading half the cards because he couldn't be bothered, which is totally fair. Like more power to Ryland. Like, I wasn't reading all the cards, certainly. So I think that's something that often happens in really powerful cubes like this. The most powerful cards these days have a lot of text on them. They might be from supplemental sets that, you haven't seen in like constructed formats or something. And so they require a lot of reading, and it's just your players are not going to read all the cards. So my deck was ultimately, I think, a little kind of mid because I was fighting for pieces with this artifact deck. My favorite match of the entire draft was for sure round 2, where I played against Ryland, the other artifact drafter, and we had these really crazy back and forth matches where our decks were just kind of each doing their big thing respectively. I got to cast, a huge Upheaval floating like 12 mana and then replay a bunch of stuff, and I had a turn where I had a huge Upheaval I could do next turn, and Ryland just had a Paradox Engine in play and nothing else. And I also had a Fiery Confluence. I could have just Confluence, destroy the Paradox Engine, and then, go off next turn with the Upheaval. But I figured I would hold it because I wanted to Upheaval and then still have the Fiery Confluence in hand so that when Ryland replayed more cards out of his hand, I could Fiery Confluence him. And then he just went off with played Coveted Jewel into Basalt Monolith into Memory Jar and just cast every single spell in his whole deck. Every card he cast made 7 mana and just absolutely went off. So classic sort of like big, powerful Magic stuff. I lost to Hullbreacher Time Twister in round 3 where like we had some back and forth games and then the back and forth game ended summarily with End Step, Flash, and Hullbreacher, Time Twister. It's like, well, all the other stuff didn't matter, I guess. I guess I just lose now. And lost to Lincoln in round 1, who game 1 just smoked me with Gut, True Zealot on curve on the play.
This has been known to happen in many contexts.
For sure, and like that's totally fair, but I sideboarded a little bit. Game 2, I kept an opening hand that had Beathook Massacre, Fiery Confluence, 3 lands, and like another sort of trinket piece of interaction, and I was like, all right, great, I'm not going to lose to this aggro deck in this game. I've got all the perfect answers for the small creature aggro deck. And then he just played Shieldred on turn 4, and I was like, that's got 5 toughness. What am I supposed to do against 5 toughness? I don't have anything to do with 5 toughness, so I lost to that card too. Like I said, I'd be curious to know what cards are excluded from this list for power reasons. And I take it from the Cube description that maybe not much, because the Cube description is kind of on its face about, like, it says don't draft this cube. It says it's bad and evil. It says if you value your sanity, don't draft this cube. If you believe in evil, don't draft the cube, because people who draft it aren't people anymore. Don't draft the cube. If you do, don't say we didn't warn you.
Evil, don't draft the cube.
I guess it's on me for not reading the Cube description that says, don't draft me. If you do, we don't say we didn't warn you. Because it was, definitely my least favorite draft of the weekend, no question. And I should have read the Cube description. It was pretty mask off by the fact that it was going to be a bad time.
Wow.
He did walk up to us mid-draft, and I believe you asked why the number 17. He's like, well, it's the most evil number, clearly. Like,
I think there's a lot of other numbers that you could put up there as maybe more evil numbers. But definitely... maximalist, powerful cube experience for all involved.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, you, Anthony, you said you're not good at powerful Magic. Grixis is your least favorite color combination.
Yeah.
So you probably absolutely scrubbed out of this
draft,
right?
really struggled during the draft. I felt pretty overwhelmed. And
you
then
passed me Time Walk.
I got really, really lucky. But I did, I guess, prove objectively that passing Time Walk was the correct decision. Yeah, I mean, this cube is a lot, and this is not the space that I feel most comfortable in terms of just like drafting a really high-powered Magic where you need to know a lot of the card interactions. The cards have a ton of text. But, I mean, I felt okay my first couple picks. Fury and Grief for my first 2 picks, and I kind of just tried to lean into that. I took some cards like Activated Sleeper, which if you...
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but there was a lot of like shooting the shit happening during the draft, and I was sitting diagonally across like an aisle from Anthony, and I was like, what are you drafting? He's like, oh, the Grixis Cube, and then shows me his first 2 picks, Fury and Grief, and I'm like, that seems good. He's like, yeah, I hope so. And then, I just thought it was really funny. It was like a lot of like banter at the draft table.
Yeah, I mean, we had some hecklers at our particular pod that were sort of stirring the pot. So yeah, I started with those 2, what are they called? Avatars, Elementals, Fury and Grief, and then took some other cards that I thought would pair well with them. Things like Activated Sleeper, which if you evoke them, then you can cast that and it becomes a copy of one of the evoked creatures. Some cards like Not Dead After All that sort of bring a thing back from the graveyard, which is, kind of, what do they call that? A scam deck?
Yeah.
What do the kids call that?
What do the kids call that? I don't know how to do this, but then sort of found my way into Reanimator a little bit because I felt like, okay, I have at least these 2 cards that are going to go to the bin very easily. I can pair that with some Reanimator. I ended up actually not casting the Fury or the Grief that often during my games, but was wheeling things like Entomb and Gristlebrand and just had a pretty solid Reanimator strategy with Persist, Recurring Nightmare, a couple other, I think the Exhume was in here, just trying to get stuff from my graveyard. I had Cathartic Pyre, Bitter Reunion, NT, Seasoned Pyromancer. So yeah, the Reanimator stuff ended up coming together pretty well.
As we said, I was in it as well, along with Alex, also from the Baltimore Play Group. I started out with a Pack 1 Pick 1 Wheel of Fortune, and I was like, all right, if this is here, this has to mean that I can do some kind of stormy things. My next pack
You're like a gun. Time to shoot myself in the foot.
That's right, baby. Hold on. Let me get a second one. Dark Ritual.
I know exactly
Perfect.
what to do with this.
Yeah.
Bang, 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 bang.
And yeah, let me just say, I let it rip. I ended up scooping up along the way like an Underworld Breach, a Faithless Looting, Dark Writ, Lion's Eye Diamond, Vampiric Tutor, all these storm signals. I don't know that there's a single storm card in the cube. I was like, I got to pivot somehow. Let me figure this out. So I started to see kind of like signals that there was maybe like a Warren Soul Trader situation going on here. And I saw a lot of like ETB things. So I was like, all right, I'll grab the Gravecrawler, grab the Blood Gas, grab the Blood Artist, grab the Barrow-goyf, grabbed...
blood. Anything with blood in the name. That's the evil cube.
Yeah, there was one decision where I took Mayhem Devil over Gut, and Lincoln's like, what the fuck are you doing? And I was just like, I do not know. I'm like, I'm going for this. This is what I want to do. I just want to just, if I'm not shooting myself, redact. But yeah, basically, we have confirmation. There is no storm in the cube. So,
interesting.
Rest in peace, me. But yeah, I ended up finding the Warren Soul Trader in the literal end of pack 3. And then, oddly enough, I got the full Stifle Knot package in the end of pack 3. I did not have a single...
That's not that odd at all. Nobody had it, and so all those cards are pretty bad unless you're in that specific deck. So
yeah, that's a good point. I ended up playing Rakdos. I got Flash and Hull Breacher into Broadside Bombardier into finally remove one of them into Time Twister by Alex both games.
Well, that was your mistake for killing the card that was going to kill you immediately instead of killing the card that might kill you if Alex drew Time Twister.
Well, I did. That's what I did.
No, I know.
You shot the other guy's guns
you made
instead of...
You made the right decision, clearly.
Yeah. And then my next match, did we only play 2 rounds? No, we played
3 rounds.
We played 3 rounds. I cannot remember round 2. I know I played Ryland as well. Ryland and I had a great time. We also Ryland did his thing. He stormed off. We actually had some pretty interesting games where I did manage to LED Underworld Breach, get my Barrow-goyf out, delicate plays. I did side into Stifle Knot at that point. I was just like, all right, this shit's not working. I'm just going to try to cheat. I did manage to put into play both Barrow-goyf and literally stifle my Dreadnought with 9 floating mana from my LED and then lose the next turn. Yeah, I definitely think this was not my favorite experience of the weekend, but
should have read the description. It says, don't draft me.
Yeah, I mean, does what it says on the label. Lesson learned. Reading is essential.
A couple of things I'll say about my draft. I did, as we referenced, pass Time Walk in pack 3, and Zach was giving me a hard time for that. But I think for context, it was one of the things I was really struggling with in this draft is I felt like I just saw 0 fixing. I was pretty committed
I took all of it. I was sitting next to you.
Black, red, and I feel like often when I go into a 3-color cube, I'm open to just I'm going to be playing all the colors. I'm probably going to be base 2 of them, but I'll splash something. And I just had 0 fixing, so I was like, I'm not going to put 3 islands in my deck for this one card when I'm already worried about being able to cast my spells. And I think I might have even taken a fixing land or possibly Kroxa, which was just a solid card for my deck out of that.
You didn't take that one because that one wheeled. I saw it.
Okay, great. It wasn't that. I was also feeling a little bit overwhelmed just by the fact that there were a ton of cards here that I didn't know. I really felt the fact that I was doing the same thing that Ryland was, which was just not reading cards. I was like, I cannot absorb all this. And there were additionally a ton of alt-art, secret lair type things. There was a card that I passed that later I saw somebody play or put in a graveyard, and they're like, I mill Grave Titan. I'm like, that's a Grave Titan? I saw that during the draft, and I did not read that at all because I did not recognize that was a Grave Titan.
I wheeled Delayed Blast Fireball, which I think is a really kind of messed up card that was also... It's a card from a supplemental set, and also this particular one had a secret layer printing. Yeah, and I'm convinced those are the reasons I wheeled it around the table twice. Because
I think it's very possible.
I got it third to last pick, and I'm like, this card it's a Plague Wind. It's so good, and I think it's only because people didn't know what the card did.
So one thing about color restricted cubes that has come up in our New York play group is we have a mono red cube that I played at Upkeep 2 Cube for a causes ago, and we had 3x15 in a mono red cube, and Judge Bones was to the designer after the event, you have to cut the cards from the packs because everybody can play every card in every pack and, supposedly has to read every card in every pack. That didn't happen in this Grixis draft, it sounds like. But, ours was the slowest draft of the entire room, and Loam Cube was being drafted, which is a full desert, really complicated.
Which is funny because I think a lot of people would think a mono red cube would be, fast.
Nope, not when you can play every card. And I think, something I feel, similarly about for these color-restricted cubes, especially for, 3 or fewer. I know that, Warren has constructed multiple 3-color cubes, so I understand if he has other reasons, but I would be in favor of cutting the pack size, not growing the pack size, because you're sort of always considering every card in every pack. It just slows the draft down, makes things really complicated, overwhelming potentially for drafters, which is some feedback that I'm hearing from folks who drafted it here.
Wait, I realized, Anthony, how did you do in that draft?
I did great. Honestly, I feel like I did get really lucky. Like the round 3, my opponent had a very busted deck. They had like incredible combos where they could reanimate this Ulamog that then saw itself in exile to get 10 counters on it. And
Talk
then
about cards I didn't
Annihilator.
read. That Ulamog, I did not read.
Oh boy. And it also felt rough because I had stuff like Exhume where I did not really want Exhume against this opponent, but I got very lucky in game 3 where I was just like blind, put Archon of Cruelty into the graveyard with my Entomb, and then turn 3 just drew the Persist and was like, okay, here we go, off to the races.
Well, you made yourself more likely to draw Persist by getting.
I did, yeah. Like
getting the Archon out of your
I
deck.
was playing to my outs and playing those fetch lands that only fetched basics in order to fuel my Croaks. I was looking for all my edges, and I had a lot of fun. Like the very first game against Shoop, I reanimated Archon of Cruelty and had the Not After Dead After All, or one of those types, Malakir Rebirth, and he fortunately had a removal spell, and I just had that Malakir Rebirth in hand and got to say, like, sorry, this is actually going to be more triggers.
What if your
you've
removal
done
spell
this.
lost you the game immediately?
So, I think that there's a lesson in there in terms of I had a very specific vision for how I expected this deck to play, and I was just faced with a lot of weird situations that I didn't expect. I didn't end up doing my plan A of using
Scamming your
Fury and
opponent.
Grief a lot, but just found a lot of ways to make the cards work, and I think that good Cube players are very good at that, and it's satisfying to feel that moment of a little bit of a level up, I think.
Yeah. Shout out Shoot, by the way. That was my round 2 opponent. Our match was 5 minutes.
Round 2 or round 1? Round 2?
That was round 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Shoot was great people.
Yeah, Sheep seemed cool. All right, let's keep it moving. Zach, the Alatta Cube, which you drafted in your round 2.
Yep. So my goal going into the second draft was there were, something like 15 cubes in this event, but there were only 8 pods. So I wanted to make sure that a cube that hadn't fired in round 1 definitely fired in round 2.
Extremely generous.
I think every single person in this room has had a cube in at least several cube events at this point. And there's something both pretty disappointing that you go through the effort of updating and communicating and advertising and bringing your cube, and then nobody engages with it. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to ideally minimize the experience of designers, because without them, none of this would have happened. I ended up in probably the spikiest, most competitive pod, I think at least of that draft, which is awesome. I love being in a place like that.
That's where you belong. Go to Spike Prison.
Yeah, somebody was
That's
doing
where you live.
Somebody was doing the stats, and it was something like I think at least 2 people from that pod were guaranteed to make top 8. 3 people from that pod had top 8'd Vertex. 2 people from that pod had top 8'd Saltbox. So I was very excited to be in that. I ended up, and I should say what the cube is. Alatta is a higher powered cube, sort of in the legacy cube style. I'd say it feels like it's in the school of Andy's Bun Magic, Greg's Atomic, Jake's Bodleian Cube. And those are cubes that are Baltimore singleton. So they break singleton for fetch lands, fetchables. Very high power level cube, generally low curve, high density of cheap disruption. And a wonderful consequence of this is the few mid-range plays that people could access were incredibly impactful. So my round 1 was against Griff on Naya mid-range, and Griff absolutely demolished me every step of the way. I was on blue-black control, and Huntmaster of the Fells, I think, flipped back and forth 3 times. So I think it was something like gained 8 life, made 4 2/2 wolves, did 6 damage to me, killed 2 of my creatures. And I had to find all of these weird lines because with Sylvan Safekeeper and then Paw Patch Recruit, my skin render was just going to give Griff more advantage. And similarly, I needed to use Virtue of Persistence to gain just enough life to not die so that I could maybe survive on the crackback, which meant both my skin render and my Virtue of Persistence were pointed at my own creatures.
Uh-oh. You don't want to be there.
It was not a winning line against Griff, but it was a winning line later on in the game when it was just like, no, 2 mana, I gain 2 life is enough for me to stabilize. Mm-hmm. Again, I think, I played in the main event. All 6 of my opponents, I think, were 5 of the 6 were relatively local to the DC area. All my opponents were just great players, had a phenomenal time. In round 3, when I was playing against, I think, Joshua and red-green mid-range, Joshua had so many threats that lined up so well against my disruption. I had sorcery speed disruption, and they had Treetop Village and Mishra's Factory. So it was much, much harder for me to interact with their artifact land, with their creature lands. They had a whole bunch of burn, and the last game came down to I was about to be dead to Joshua's onboard Seal of Fire. And that's where I virtue of persistence my own creature, because all Joshua had to pressure me with at that point were creature lands. I did that to end up at 3 life with a Seal of Fire in play for the rest of the game. So at virtual 1 life, and I know Joshua has burn, and I draw Portent just as I start turning the corner. And
Portent Joshua.
So I Portent Joshua. I pointed a lot
Ring
of Portent.
What makes you
Portent.
happier, Portent against the opponent or me beating you with Barbarian Ring, which we didn't mention?
I love both. I love both a lot.
That's what I want to hear.
And I needed 2 things to be true. The most important thing was I needed a single turn of breathing room, because Joshua had like beautiful old school beloved card, Call of the Herd. I needed a single turn of breathing room because if Joshua had a threat the next turn, they'd be able to double threat and probably overwhelm my ability to turn the corner. But if there was a single piece of burn there, I needed to hold my Snapcaster Mage specifically for it so that I could Snapcaster hit a counterspell, which I had plenty of. And I saw 3 mediocre threats on top of the library. And the question that I have is, if I do this, I know exactly what I'm dealing with for 3 turns and I can try and stabilize. But Joshua's going to be able to go double threat. Can I stabilize against that? I decided I couldn't do it.
Make him shuffle.
Made Joshua shuffle. Joshua hit bricks, which I needed, but I made a critical error of I held up mana for a counterspell because I felt I needed to protect myself against any burn. Eventually deployed the Snapcaster, and then on the turn that I finally was about to win the game with like a 9/9 Murktide Regent, Eternal Witness, plenty of burn in the graveyard, my counter magic was gone, and I think that sent Joshua to the top 8, which knocked me out. But just like such good back and forth for all of my matches, with I guess the one exception of Griff, who just like demolished me. But if I'm on blue-black control and my opponent is on Naya, and they're like Huntmaster of Fells is the MVP, like they're definitely the hero of that story.
That's definitely how that goes.
How does it feel when your opponent says shuffle with the Portent? It's like, it's cool because they're like, oh, the top 3, or it sucks because it's like, oh, the top 3 cards in my library were great, but it's also like, I got him scared.
Yeah, it feels good, I think, to have it shuffled. Yeah.
I think I was being open about exactly what was happening. Yeah. It's just like, I don't want you to have burn, but you have 3 threats.
You want your opponent to tell you to shuffle because then you're back to the port and not having done anything, basically. Yeah. You're back to drawing from random decks.
That's true,
You always want them to shuffle.
If they stack, then you're like, well, I know that's worse than average. Yeah, and that's not good for me.
It's like being fate sealed by Jace the Mind Sculptor. If your opponent bottoms, at the very least, they have made a tiny dent in the expected value of the top card of your library. If they keep it on top, they now know exactly what you're drawing, and they know they can deal with it.
Yeah.
Or they're bluffing, which is very cool.
Ooh, yeah.
Now we're on to the round 3 of the day. We already covered Scott and Gabor's round 3, which was the Depleted Lands draft. I was playing a Time Spiral Cube in round 3 in the free play area. Did not make top 8. And this was probably actually my favorite cube of the weekend. It originally started as a Time Spiral set cube, and then the designer Jill has just like slowly been like, actually, maybe a little more of this, maybe a little less of that.
I love that. That's a great process for a cube.
Yeah, and I think with the encouragement of our table is going to do even more of that, of just kind of like turning it more into what she likes and less what exactly happened to be in the various Time Spiral packs. And I started on Thelonite Hermit, which is the Hermit Druid for Saprolings and has Morph.
Near and dear to my heart.
And then my pick 2 was a Chroma's Memorial. And this is, again, basically like a set cube. So there's mostly commons and uncommons in packs. And I started on what I thought were 2 very good rares. And that sent me down a Saproling direction. Green was very open in pack 1, and I barely had committed to a second color. I had like a speculative Ninja of the Deep Hours I saw kind of late, and then a speculative, what's the 2-mana Saproling maker in black that you can sacrifice a Saproling.
Deathspore Thallid?
Deathspore Thallid, thank you. No, no. Is it Deathspore Thallid?
That's the one that gives -1/-1?
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah. I thought Deathspore Thallid was the one from
Are you
Dominaria.
questioning whether Anthony has fungus knowledge?
This little guy with the funny hat?
Yeah, that guy. Cool. So I had that and Ninja of the Deep Hours as like 2 good cards in other colors out of pack 1, but I was basically all green. And then pack 2, green was not open, but black was. And so I kind of moved in on the black-green deck and just had a really fun like retail limited style deck, which I really loved. A couple of like spiky rares that, my opponents also had their own spiky rares that sort of played out well. The highlights for me in this draft were I got a late Life and Limb, and I was like, am I supposed to play this card? This is a 4-mana enchantment that makes all forests, yours and your opponent's Saprolings, and all Saprolings forests. And it also makes your Saprolings 1/1s and forests. So if they happen to have more stats, then they become 1/1s instead of their bigger stats. It's a really funky card. And I was like, am I supposed to play this card? And I wheeled it around the table because nobody else wanted it. And I put it in my deck, and it turned out to be like really sick. It was really, really awesome. I had a couple of anthems for Saprolings. I had Gaia's Anthem and then also the Thelonite Hermit. And so there were a couple of games where I was just like, oh yeah, I'll make all my creatures into 2/2s, or all my lands into 2/2s, and just start bashing you with them, which was really cool. Also, my favorite line from the weekend, which is not even that complicated or like, big brain. It's like very obviously the most like correct line was very simple board state. My opponent has a 2/2. I have a Penumbra Spider that has a Bound in Silence on it, which is a pacifism that you can. It's a rebel. It's a rebel pacifism. And I have only one card in hand. My opponent has one card in hand. My one card in hand is Dark Withering, the 6-mana removal spell with Madness for just a single black. And they attack me. I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to just Dark Withering my own Penumbra Spider because that means I can then eat your 2/2 and keep a creature afterwards, as opposed to removing your creature and then still having nothing on my side of the board. Which is like it's obviously the correct play, but like that's the kind of stuff I love about Magic, where you're like, yeah, you go to combat, I'll kill my own creature and then get the Penumbra Spider token and be off to the races a little bit. I ended up losing in round 3 in the finals. This is my last chance for a pin, playing against local villain Max, who Max was winding up Nate so much in this draft. Nate is, generally speaking, a member of our local play group. I love Nate. He's probably one of the most like even-keeled players, I think. Like I had never seen Nate salt off. He's like very gracious all the time. And he was at the end of his rope playing Max. Max had this blue-red Storm deck. And against Nate in 3 consecutive games went turn 1 Lotus Bloom into like turn 4 empty the Warrens for like 6 or 8 goblins and then just like run away with the game. Meanwhile, Nate...
Not to mention the like what you would say as a joke.
Just wait. I'll get there.
Okay, fine.
He's a blue-red Storm deck with no fixing lands, just mountains and islands, because this is, again, mostly a set cube. There are very few fixing lands running around. And then Max is also playing Lingering Souls off of 2 plains and 1 swamp, and in Max's defense, 2 Dreamscape Artists. This is his whole argument, and he draws and casts Lingering Souls and flashes it back in like every game he plays all night, and just has the perfect hand in every single game against Nate. In both his games against me, like his deck was just like almost a constructed deck. Like I kept an amazing opening hand of Deathspore Thallid, Life and Limb. I had like 2 other good spells, 2 lands, and I was like, this is like a perfect curve for my deck. I had Thelonite Hermit too in there too. I was like, this is the perfect curve for my deck. And he just, on turn 4 made 8 goblins. And I was like, okay, well, by turn 7, I can make 4 Saprolings, so that's pretty cool too, right? So yeah, Max's deck was just absolutely firing on all cylinders in a way that statistically just it does not make any sense. And Nate was like going to wring his little neck, and it was so funny. He got so mad. He was just like, it's always this with you. It's always just do the thing, even though it's bad. It makes no sense. It's always happening. It's just it was beautiful. I loved it. It was everything I wanted my day to end in.
Yeah, I mean, what do you need to cast Lingering Souls? You need 1 plains and 1 swamp, and that's good enough.
Yeah.
For Max, not for anybody else.
Yeah, so I guess he had 4 white sources and 3 black sources in his deck, if you count the Dreamscape Artist as sources, which you have to untap with, and then also, do a jump through a hoop to go get your basic lands.
That's why you gotta have your Deathspore Thallid ready.
It was crazy. And yeah, Max's deck just drew perfectly every single game. So I guess congratulations, Max.
Maybe Max saw the Matrix and just like built something that was very, very functional. Dreamscape Artist is an unassuming card, but it's an incredibly powerful card that you get to cast Harrow every single turn. And I believe if memory serves,
blue.
Yeah.
Weird.
Well, I mean, it's planar chaos, so everything is color
They
shifted.
do be chaosing the plane.
But I believe critically those lands enter untapped.
They do, yeah.
So you're basically spending
It's
1 mana
ramp, yeah.
and a card from your hand, both to ramp, and that card, thinning your deck is overvalued by a lot of players, but
thinning your deck a lot.
Thinning your deck a lot. Ripping 8 lands out of your deck is a very big difference. And you can even do sweet plays with that of you can discard Lingering Souls and then get your black source and immediately flash it back.
No, but he wasn't doing that. He was casting and flashing it back every game. He had 4 spirits in every game I saw.
Skill issue.
So, well, hang on. Actually, this is a potential through line of the entire event. It seems like Lingering
Max
Souls
making
has
you
come
feel
up
Lingering
at
Souls.
least once every single draft. And it's the kind of card that it is a very simple card. It has a lot of play to it and a lot of modality just from the fact that flashback, being off color, functioning from the graveyard, generating tokens.
There's a reason people love that card. It is a very lovable card.
And it is a very, very powerful card.
So
And there's
insanely
something
powerful.
wonderful about the fact that that card is, gosh, I think it's from early 2013.
Yeah, it's Dark Ascension, I think.
Dark Ascension, so like January, February 2013. And people are still playing it today. It's still having a big influence. And in some cases, it's having an
too big of an
outsized
influence.
and that's the thing. It might be having an outsized influence of the combination of simplicity and nostalgia and familiarity is leading people to perhaps put it in experiences where it might be more of a power level outlier than it's intended to be.
That's interesting. Like, I think of Sol Ring as a card that is similar, where people that play a lot of Commander are just used to Sol Ring being ever present, and then they come to Cube and they're like, of course I put Sol Ring here. It belongs everywhere. And it's like, no, it does not belong here. And maybe for a certain type of person that plays a lot of Cube, it's like Lingering Souls. That's, of course, it's got all this modality. It's super flexible. Of course it belongs here. And maybe it does.
Well, Lingering Souls was in Time Spiral Remastered on the bonus sheet, question mark. So, I mean, that's why it was presumably in that cube. I can't speak to the Depleted Lands if it ties in thematically or if there's something else exciting about it.
Yeah, you know when you go to a desert and there's like spirits around? It's kind of like that. It's flavorful.
Right, yes. Every time I've been to a desert, just like that. Or were the packs collated for this if it wasn't if it was
They were
close to-
not. Jill
Not, okay.
had been collating packs prior and is like on that journey of being like, maybe this isn't fully a set cube, and was like, this is one of the first few drafts, I think like third or fourth draft, where like the packs were not collated anymore. And she was just like, there might be a lot of rares. And we're like, that's fine. It's fine. Jill.
Awesome.
Don't worry about it.
Awesome. Congrats to Jill. I
Yeah.
mean, it is like 800 cards or something.
It
I
is
saw
800 card cube.
Wow, good
Wow.
luck broadcast shuffling. I'm
Amazing.
glad I wasn't there to lead the broadcast
Required the
shuffle.
full table with that broadcast shuffle, but we got there. All right. You make
Yeah.
people feel bad in 100 Ornithopters for your third round, Zach.
So
The Santa Claus of making you feel bad.
I can understand if we're going to go over 100 Ornithopters pretty quickly because, I mean, we talked about the cube for about half an hour after the draft.
I think more than that.
Yeah.
That was a long conversation.
So there's a lot to say about it. 100 Ornithopters is the much beloved cube of Andy Mangold. I'm a big fan of this cube. I've been on this podcast talking about it before. It is a 360 card cube where 100 of the cards are Ornithopter. And the challenge of the cube is, what are you going to do with Ornithopters when every deck needs to rely on Ornithopters to win, asterisk, but the method by which you are going to win the game is going to differ from deck to deck. I have had pretty strong theories about what the best thing to do in 100 Ornithopters is since about halfway through my first draft, which was a little over a year ago now.
I think the answer is be as skilled as Zach Barish, who is currently 12-0 lifetime in matches in 100 Ornithopters.
Spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
My belief is that combo control is the best thing that you can be doing in 100 Ornithopters, that you should always choose to be on the draw because every deck is about A plus B combo. So finding the cards that you need is critical. And Ornithopters can always be cashed in for some quantity of life, which is going to make aggro weaker. And aggro is itself weak to... Again, every deck is an A plus B combo. If you interact with the single B they have, all of their A's, all of their Ornithopters might just do nothing for a while. I've also felt like blue is probably the best color in the cube in that stack interaction is really, really good. It's not obvious how Duress and Negate answer every single non-Ornithopter spell in the cube. I guess they don't answer like Kessig Wolf Run, but they are incredibly flexible, incredibly versatile. Spell Pierce is live much longer than people expect it to, because with so many zero drops, people are often running 13, 14 lands, but their win conditions are still like 4 drops, like Mystic Forge. This might have been the strongest deck I've ever had in 100 Ornithopters. I opened on Echoing Boon, which is one of the biggest power level outliers. It's a conspiracy that essentially says whenever you target one of your Ornithopters with a spell, you can copy it on anything else. What does this mean? It means Repeal is single blue, draw 2 mana. It's Thoughtcast. That's also a disruptive spell.
Draw 2 cards even.
It's just like a 1 mana paradoxical outcome. And also you can bounce your Ornithopter and one of your opponents, correct?
Correct. And that's what I would often do with Twisted Image of I sacrifice my Ornithopter and kill one of my opponent's Ornithopters.
And draw 2 cards.
And draw 2 cards. It's Village Rites where I take one of them with me. But just sort of everything came together. I got nearly every single counterspell.
You were literally one counterspell off. You didn't have Flusterstorm. That was it.
And Metallic
Rebuke.
Rebuke.
Metallic Rebuke.
But like I had all of the free counterspells. My win conditions were cast ad nauseum, reveal my deck to my opponent, and then they concede. Or play Bow of Nylea, demonstrate a loop, and then my opponent concedes. There's a rule in the cube where whenever you win the game with an Ornithopter, you do a tick mark on it. None of my Ornithopters ever connected for any meaningful amount of damage. But yeah, This is in response to a change that Andy recently made to the cube to reduce the power level of disenchants, a lot of interaction, which is totally understandable because you break up too many of the Bs of the A plus B combo, and a lot of these more aggressive or focused decks are not going to function. I still remember Cube for a Cause about a year ago. I think a friend of the show, Ollie, went turn 1, played 6 Ornithopters into Obelisk of Erd. No land, and then won the next turn. But if their opponent had Force of Negation, Ollie's not doing anything for the rest of the game, most likely.
But then you can just scoop and go to the next one.
Yes. And again, I think the cube is wonderful in how the curation of it is so bizarre, but the moment-to-moment gameplay of it feels so much like Magic.
Sometimes. So Ryland, aforementioned opponent in Tresserhorn Gardens, played Ornithopters with you in this round, and he told me afterwards, he was like, I was really nervous. I don't play a lot of combo. I felt like I was sort of out of my depth here. He was like, but I actually loved how much these games felt like normal Magic. Like, I was playing creatures and my opponent was attacking, we were blocking, and I was like, is it Spellslinger deck? But my spells were just Ornithopters. Like, I was still like casting spells to like trigger things, and that was like my whole thing. That was some of my favorite feedback I've ever gotten on the cube, because so often I hear the feedback of like, it's crazy, everything's different and like wild and completely recontextualized. And I like that too, but there's a like shred of, I think, resonance with like what Magic actually is normally. Like, it's not so dissimilar that you're like completely unmoored and none of your existing heuristics matter. It's just like a slight twist on them, and that kind of feedback was something I really love to hear.
I mean, but just to speak to that game that you played, I watched some of your games, Zach, and your opponent had a hand that was, say, like 2 lands, an Ornithopter, and some kind of threat, and on their turn, you cast Ad Nauseam in response to them casting one of their threats. You knew the total mana cost of your deck and drew to, I think, 1 or 2 cards left in your library, showed them both forces, and basically had no card disadvantage because you were sure you had to discard some things to the forces, but you just drawn your whole deck with Ad Nauseam on their turn, so you weren't going to have to discard down immediately. It was, I mean, a masterclass in what Ad Nauseam can do, and the fact that it was all very predictable. And then, yeah, you knew that then you had the Bow of Nylea to start looping your deck, so even if you weren't exactly killing them this turn, you were going to be untapping with those forces again forever. And like then combine that with Echoing Boon that you had just a bunch of draw 2s. You could always put a draw 2 on top of your library. It was kind of brutal.
Yeah, my theory about the cube is because of the density of Ornithopters, card draw is perhaps the most valuable thing that you can get because there's so much air in people's decks, particularly if one critical part of your deck is disrupted. The most important thing is be able to find as many of your pieces as you can, which is also part of the reason why I choose to be on the draw. Ornithopters will buy you time, and I was only running 8 Ornithopters in my deck, so when I was top decking against an opponent, there was a decent chance they would have hit an Ornithopter when they already had more Ornithopters than they knew what to do with. I was less likely to find an Ornithopter. And then after that, I'm looking for ways to disrupt my opponent's game plan and find a way to win eventually. This deck could have won via damage, but I mean, Bow of Nylea has been spoken about a lot on this podcast.
It's just too bad that
your dissent is registered.
You cut so many disenchants that it was really hard for people to deal with Bow of Nylea.
That was the thing, where it was just my opponents, because they could only interact at sorcery speed and like at 3+ mana for the most case, it was very, very easy for me to protect my bow.
We can talk about Bow more later. Like this, whatever. People here talk about this cube all the time. I do want to say one thing, which is no, it has nothing to do with this. Ad Nauseam. I love this card. I think obviously one of the most powerful things about it is that it's an instant. You know, if you don't need to draw cards otherwise, you draw them on your opponent's end step. You untap with all your mana. You haven't discarded hand size yet. I see people cast Ad Nauseam sorcery speed all the time in this cube.
Well, you look at your hand, and you're like, I have extra mana. I want to do stuff now.
Yeah. How do I get people to stop doing that?
I'm convinced now. I don't know if I've ever cast that card in my life, but I'm definitely doing it instant speed first time I do.
It also depends on the type of deck that you are running. Specifically, my deck was a controlling, hyper-reactive deck. I was using bounce lands to make sure that I kept hitting all of my land drops, and I didn't need to do anything unless my opponents did. So there was never any need for me to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if Ad Nauseam is much more often going to be in like one-turn kill decks of, all right, I've stuck my Bantu's Monument and I think Jaws of Defeat is the card from Dark Year Commander. And now I need to draw 7 Ornithopters in order to win the game. So you're going to fire it off right then and there.
That'd be one thing. But actually, what I see all the time is people cast a sorcery speed, then discard down to their perfect hand and say, ooh, maybe I'll untap next turn and get to go off. And it's like, no, you do this on their end step. What are you doing? Anyway.
Reading the card, yeah. Like Sharpie the
Just
instant under
circle
yeah.
instant,
Yeah.
multiple times.
I mean, it's such an insane effect. It like feels like a sort, like if it was printed now, which would be insane, for a bunch of reasons. Like I think it would be a sorcery. Like the instant speed nature of it is part of what makes it so powerful. But yeah, I think maybe like folks who aren't familiar with the card, haven't played with it before, or seen it played before, or just like these like 5 mana huge draw spells typically are sorceries. Yeah,
and I think part of that is one of the heuristics of the format. Magic changes constantly. The nature of Booster Draft, the nature even of Cube, I feel like has really shifted over the years. Every 5 years, I feel like the culture of Cube is completely different. The kinds of cards that you're going to see, the kind of discussions that people are having, which is fundamentally about the game and the communities being this vibrant, ever-changing system.
Except, of course, for Lingering Souls, the one fixed point in
it was
all
an
of Cube.
uncommon back then, so it should be in every cube now.
But one of the many things that I love about 100 Ornithopters is, while the gameplay feels very familiar, a lot of the heuristics feel quite old to me. There has not been a format in quite some time where being on the play or the draw was something people really thought about very often. But there were formats, or maybe at least when I was really getting back to learning the game over a decade ago, or relearning the game, where being on the draw was an actual conversation in sealed, sometimes. This is a cube, I feel, where patience and finding your moment really, really matter. And I think people, oftentimes nowadays, it really is about onboard presence. It's about pressing your advantage. And people are applying modern day heuristics to a cube that harkens back in some ways to an older time where, no, I think the statistics are in general, in Booster Draft, in Cube, if you are able to spend your mana every single turn for the first 4 turns of the game, you have a disproportionately large advantage in that matchup. And in 100 Ornithopters, I don't believe that that is true. It really is a matter about maximizing the impact of your plays, which oftentimes means effectively wasting mana and waiting until you can get the best bang for your buck. It's one thing for me to cast Ad Nauseam as soon as I hit 5 mana, but then I'm going to have to start deploying those spells immediately. And if I'm not under any pressure, I can wait 4 turns, 5 turns until I know the exact kind of things that I need, and I'm less likely to discard to hand size because I can suddenly start deploying all of my things. And when my ultimate game plan, the number one way I'm going to win the game, is by setting up a bow loop so my opponent knows every turn I'm going to draw 3 cards, I'm going to be impervious to decking, and I'm going to have a disenchant effect, a counter spell, and an onboard removal spell. They know they have that inevitability. I might as well wait as long as possible. But that kind of patience being a virtue is often not as frequently rewarded, so it's much harder for people to come to that conclusion. And again, that textural difference of the experience is one of the things that's both wonderful about it and makes it more challenging.
I'm going to invoke podcast host privilege here. I'm going to have the last word on this real quick, and then we're going to move on and talk about Anthony's third round.
Thank you for being transparent about what you're doing.
Yes, I'm using my privilege, which is just that we talked about this at length. We could talk about this for many hours more, I'm sure, Zach. And all I want other listeners to know listening to this is that I think your strategy for you is absolutely hugely successful in this cube, and I've watched so many other players, some good players, try to do the same thing and fall flat on their face time and time again, which is why I don't know how to handle this deck from a cube design perspective, because it's like a really good player could rock up and at a table of other players that maybe don't know what the score is. Like, I think you were at a table of only Alex had drafted the 100 Ornithopters before, and everybody else was brand new to the cube. And so, you were a big shark in a pond full of people that were like, ooh, Obelisk of Herd, That's my last word, is just that this deck has not overperformed in mass, but it certainly has overperformed in the hands of certain players, which... How do you bounce for that? I just don't know. Maybe just ban you from playing the cube.
You've done it before.
Let's go on and talk about Anthony's third round, because we buried the lead a little bit here. Our boy, the absolute lad, came in second overall in the event after Breakers.
Yeah, third overall.
Third overall. All right, let's have a little clap. Let's have a little clap for the absolute lad. And because Lincoln got special gold pins, you played in it.
Bribed.
There was discussion of, okay, if I finish the draft, do I get to have the pin?
I'm not going to interfere with somebody else's fun. I'm not going to like drop before playing a game. But there was some question of, I was not necessarily emotionally prepared to do 3 drafts in a day, and I have dropped from some events in the past after some decent performances. But I was like, okay, Lincoln, I noticed there's 8 gold pins sitting on that table over there, and 8's an auspicious number. I wonder what those pins might be for. And say if somebody were to make the top 8, does that qualify for a pin? No. Turns out no. And the whole crew was staying for round 3 in the free play draft anyway, so I did draft in the 2-8. I was really happy with my performance overall. I went 3-0 in the Tresserhorn Garden Cube with that Reanimator deck. That was a ton of fun just to like finally feel like I cracked the code on a Reanimator deck after having some mixed success, but like some big failures with that, especially in like Aqua's Cube recently. And going to the finals, losing to Alex in our first draft in the Desert Cube. So we were drafting in the finals in the top 8, Julian's Compost Cube, which we already talked about a bit, right?
Yeah, that was Gabor's first draft of the day. You ended your day on it.
Perfect. And I've played this cube a couple times, as we mentioned, but it's not one that I necessarily have had success with. It is one that just takes like a lot of knowledge of combos, and honestly just like, I think, patience and being able to understand how to execute those combos well. My draft, I waffled a lot in pack 1 and didn't really know where I was going. I took a fair amount of fixing. I took a Corvold, which I thought is like a powerful game-ending card, but ended up finding myself in green-red, which felt particularly open. I got an early Fable the Mirror Breaker, which I felt like, obviously, this is both a synergistic card, and this is an environment that you really can benefit from a lot of those synergies, but also is something that, like, I know how to turn a goblin sideways and make treasures and cast more big stuff. Ultimately, I ended up in green-red with a little bit of blue, just to talk through, like, best case scenario, I only played round 1, but I had a game where I played turn 2 Evora, Insatiable Air, which is a vampire that whenever you discard cards, it gets bigger, into turn 2 Kiora, which immediately draws 2, discards 2, and if you can get to Threshold, makes an 8/8. And then turn 3, I think I played this Rydia, which then I played a fetch land and cracked it to loop 2 more cards, and like when the deck worked, it felt kind of nuts, and I just got to make this huge creature and dig through my deck, and meanwhile discard Anger so I could attack with everybody immediately. And my opponent had a very clever idea. Melissa just made a 13/13 flying trample creature on turn 3 or 4 both games, and I could not beat that. I tried my best to figure out, can I go big enough and wide enough to just attack past this? And I could not, so great job, Melissa. I was knocked out of the top 8 very quickly.
How did you feel having played in the top 8? It's something you've avoided before. You've
dropped only your cube at Saltbox you played.
I did play my cube at Saltbox. It's exhausting. I'm very serious that doing 2 drafts in one day is a lot of magic for me. Doing 3 is kind of insane, and I was not feeling like I was on all cylinders. I mean, like, yeah, even in the Tresserhorn Gardens, I was already like, I'm not reading all these cards well. I know I'm making mistakes, and I'm doing my best, and it's not great. I did feel like I eventually kind of got my feet under me in the draft, and I felt like I sort of knew what the deck was doing, but it was a lot, and I was not disappointed to be knocked out quickly. I mean, I guess another aspect of just how I was feeling is I was not feeling super stressed out. And maybe a year ago, if I was going to top 8, I would have been putting a lot more pressure on myself and feeling like anxiety.
Old hat, you've been there, you'll be there again.
I don't think it's quite that it's old hat, but it's like, yeah, I mean, I know more people in the room. We're all here and have a good time. I like understand that there is a slightly higher expectation in terms of playing carefully in the top 8, but I might have even maybe deliberately just passed on some cards that I knew like that's too complicated. I'm going to make mistakes with that. Let's not do that. Let's try and do something that I can.
That is sometimes the correct EV
comfortably.
play.
Yeah. So overall, I think it was a good time, and I'm happy to get my gold top 8 pin and add that to my collection.
Got to be one of the greatest pin collections of anybody on.
I mean, as far as cube pin collections, I think the only one. Well, I shouldn't say that. Somebody's going to point out other people, but I know Bones has a hefty collection, which I will not call Stolen Valor because.
Oh no.
He's earned those.
Very earned. That's
well-deserved valor.
Yeah, Greg and Bones are up there too in terms of their pin collections. But yeah, congratulations.
Thanwe you.
And we got to shout out Alex, who Alex had the exact same record as you, only lost to you,
yes.
Lost one match to you, and
yeah, I think like because of the tiebreakers, I lost in the finals, and he lost in the second round of our second draft. So it's like really minor edge.
I don't think that's what it was. I think it was the win percentage of his opponents that he beat. He
Okay.
just, the
Is that not,
Breakers is
are
a
those not
punishment.
related?
The opponents
They are related,
The opponents that he beat just had worse records overall. Even though he had the same record, and his only loss was to you, who came third in the overall in the event.
Yeah.
We went to the bar for dinner with thinking you were both in the top 8, and then he just very narrowly
After
got
we had
edged
both
out.
beaten each other, so like
Yes.
it was. I was ready for this narrative of the grudge match.
And of my 3 match losses all day, 2 of them were to you two, and I was like, well, I want to get beat by the best of the best, clearly. But yeah, he narrowly got edged out, and then also he was the 9th, and the 8th person wasn't there for the longest time. And they were like, "Alex, you're in," and then they
Like,
took a picture.
does anybody have Alex's number? Like we might end up needing to pull him in. And I was like, yeah, I'll text him. And he's like, let me know when I need to stop drinking.
He walked in with a full glass of wine, took a top 8 picture.
Which I was just mad he should have brought 2 glasses and a bottle. I was going to be there with him.
There's a top 8 picture of him with a full glass of wine, and then right as they're about to sit down and draft, the actual 8th walked in, and they were like, "All right, Alex, you're back out. New top 8 picture."
How does it feel to have a pin taken from you, Zach? Is that something that you can speak to? Sorry, I'm just opening old wounds just for podcast
Just pry
equity.
open those scars.
Sometimes you go undefeated in a cube draft. They give you a pin and they take the pin back, and then you talk about it.
With your therapist many times over the years. All right, we got to call it there. This has been a long episode. We got to be kind to our dear editor, Matthew. But thank you all for joining me for this episode, joining Anthony and I. This was really fun to have you all in the studio and get everyone's perspective on a cool Cube event. If you want to go to a Cube event just like this, check out our page on our website, luckypaper.co/events, where you can see all the upcoming Cube events in your area or elsewhere. They're worth, I think, a little travel to. If you want to take a little flight, a train, a little drive, I think these events are worth it. They are the best way to play Magic. We said it a million times, and I'll keep saying it.
Especially a train, if that's an option.
Yeah, Cube trains are great.
Amtrak corridor.
Anyway, on that bombshell, that's the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. All of our music for this show is produced by DJ James Nasty, and the show is edited by Matthew. If you want to support the show and everything we do at Lucky Paper, you can support us on Patreon. Check out a link in the show notes to see what's going on over there. All the Magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast, and this podcast was produced by thinking really hard about Magic cards and speaking to microphones about it. Anthony, Scott, Gabor, Zach, thank you all for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Anthony's going to go make lasagna.
Oh, I'm so excited for this lasagna. It's going to be
Lasagna.
tremendous.